Welcome back to part 2 of Endarkenment, New Age Fake Enlightenment by Jack Tanner. This show is known as the Armageddon Rainbow, taking a nod to Reading Rainbow. And I can tell by the numbers from when I posted the first part that human narrators are more sought after than a good sounding computer voice. So I think we're going to keep running with this idea. And I like the idea of the classical music in the background. Gives it a bit of ambience. And I monkeyed with the settings a bit. It looked like the resolution was a little bit too low. I intended for you to be able to read along, but it looks like the resolution on part 1 was a bit too low. So I've doubled the resolution and the sound quality sample rate. So without further ado, let's begin. Ken Wilber has no intention of arriving at a rational, grand, final theory of everything, one that gives an exact ontology, an epistemology based on precise reason and logic, and constitutes a total, infallible answer to everything, but merely a pretense of such a theory, predicated on Wilber's personal irrational belief that Buddhist non-duality is the truth of reality, based on no evidence and no proof whatsoever. Plenty of idiots have swallowed Wilber's nonsense hook, line, and sinker. What they all have in common is that they are mathematically and scientifically illiterate. There are only 2 shows in town: rationalist mathematics, ontological mathematics, and empiricist mathematics, scientific materialism. Everything else is wrong to the extremest degree possible. If mathematics is not at the core of your answer to existence, you're ipso facto wrong. Wilber doesn't know the first thing about mathematics or science, and neither do any of his followers. They are all subject to the non-rational fallacy that non-reason and non-logic can furnish an answer to existence. Any such answer would, of course, automatically be irrational and illogical, and only people that hate reason and logic could ever defend it. Never forget, there are infinite wrong answers and only one right answer to existence. All of the wrong answers are those that defy and dismiss reason and logic, and the one right answer is the one that expresses reason and logic to the fullest extent. Only ontological mathematics does so, and scientific materialism is the closest empiricist approximation to it, purely because it uses mathematics, the true language and substance of reality. All things are waves, analytic number sequences. As Pythagoras said thousands of years ago, all things are numbers, number rules all. You should have listened to Pythagoras and not the Buddha. Mythic types believe that myths and metaphors are literal reality. Just look at the literalist interpretations of the Bible. Rationalist reductionism asserts that all myths and metaphors are false, and all mainstream religious and spiritual talk is childish nonsense and idiocy, openly defying reason and logic. Postmodern New Agers deny that there is any such thing as objective reality. They are out-and-out relativists and subjectivists. They believe that metaphors are literally real if they like them, because everyone has their own path and their own truth. Discordianism, the worship of chaos, could be called the religious wing of postmodernism. Rationalist reductionism upholds absolute, objective reality, which necessarily has one absolute, infallible, correct answer. Those who are integrated, i.e. Wilber's gang of dunces, believe that metaphors are a non-literal language and refer to reality in poetic, experimental ways. This is just more New Age mumbo-jumbo and woo. Wilber's holistic solution, based on Buddhist non-dualism, is not capable of any analytic definition, does not permit any use of reason and logic, and prevents the use of the laws of reason and logic to rationally and logically unify all things. Rational holism. Hence is nothing but pure woo and mysticism. It's as far from the truth as you can get, based on endless fallacies, and merely masquerading as an all-encompassing theory. It rejects mathematics, science, and philosophy, or relegates them to inadequate partial perspectives, unable to see the noble truth of Buddhism. Sad, pathetic. Here's an actual message by a Wilburite. See if you can make any sense of it. Red will regard early orange as a threat, trying to steal my space. Not on my watch. Blue will regard early orange as blasphemous, and mid-orange as a nut job. You just don't get it, having to use your fancy-smancy words and too much logic and reasoning. Piss off. Don't you feel the primordial connection? It feels so good. Why are you so dry? It's dawning on me that the vestiges of magical thinking, perhaps purple, transports red and blue into a magical delusion that they're in green or beyond. So angst against you is perfectly natural, predictable, and part of the order of the respectable stage of maturity. It is hard to get into the early orange emotionally and in your gut, but you can get into early orange rationally, intellectually more easily. But it's very difficult to go beyond mid-orange because the vestiges of blue are really hard to shake off. End quote. What the fuck? The hilarious thing is that these people actually imagine that they are intellectuals. All they do is color code each other and sneer at each other. They are totally clueless about ontology, epistemology, metaphysics, reason, logic, science, philosophy, and mathematics. Not true. The fanboys of Ken Wilber like to cite the following diagram to illustrate Wilber's ideological claim that his integral system is a way of supporting all beliefs as true. This diagram purports to be about how different perspectives can supposedly be true at the same time. So which is it? Are two perspectives shown here true? Or are both perspectives in fact formally false? Surely there's only one truth here. The 3D cylinder accompanied by two totally false perspectives, namely the 2D projected square and circle. Far from showing Wilber's genius, this diagram actually demonstrates his total folly. How false viewpoints can be labeled as true when they are patently not true. The earth looks flat to the simplest observation. It's not flat. The flat earth is false. To the simplest observation, the earth is fixed and the sun moves. This is totally false. Earth is moving around the sun. Heliocentrism is true and geocentrism is false. According to Wilber's way of thinking, flat earth theory and geocentrism must both be true. In exactly the same way as the square and the circle in the above diagram are supposedly true. But how can any sane person support flat earth theory or geocentrism in any way at all? The task is not to conclude that they are partially true from a particular perspective, but to conclude that this perspective is fundamentally false and does not capture true reality at all. It actively misrepresents reality. Isn't it amazing that lies, totally false perspectives, can be sold by charlatans such as Wilbur and his ilk as supportable and legitimate truths. So given the Wilburite method, we are not supposed to refute flat earthers and geocentrists, but to agree with them, to pat them on the back and say that they have discovered part of the truth. They haven't. They are wrong. Equally, we are not to trash the absurd claims of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism, but to say that they are all true from their own perspective. But they're not. They're all false. Equally, materialism isn't true. It's false. Idealism is true. Well, Wilbur and his followers are unable to comprehend the basic laws of logic. The law of identity. Whatever is, is. The law of non-contradiction. Nothing can be and not be. The law of excluded middle. Everything must either be or not be. You cannot say that materialism and idealism are both true, since the definition of one presupposes the falsehood of the other. No one can say that materialists are idealists and both right and both have a part of the truth. They don't. Materialists are wrong and idealists are right. Instead of trying to establish the truth, Wilbur promotes the lie, tries to make every lie part of the truth. Some truth that's going to be. There's only one truth, and there's infinite lies. That's the law. That's Occam's razor. That's the principle of sufficient reason. There's only one simplest, rational answer to existence. It's a unique and exclusive answer. It's ontological mathematics. If you agree that reality has no reason to be anything other than as simple as it can possibly be, why would it be more complex? Then you must support ontological mathematics. Everything else is nonsense, guaranteed. Simplicity demands it. Nothing can beat simplicity, which is the ultimate rationality. Science, just like Wilburism, confuses the square and the circle for the cylindrical reality. Science can't conceive that reality is based on exactly that which is non-empirical, non-observable, the immaterial singularity of mind. That's the true unseen reality, available to intellect but not to the senses. Plato pointed out all of this thousands of years ago. Wilburites like to say absurd things such as, one point of view does not show the whole picture. What these irrational people are trying to say is that all temporal and contingent perspectives can never show the eternal, necessary reality. In fact, it's a category error to imagine that any such limited perspective ever can. That's exactly why science, based on the fallible, limited, delusional human senses and contingent experiments performed in space and time, will never arrive at the absolute truth. It's also why Wilburism, a ragtag collection of man-made speculations, conjectures, beliefs, opinions, and mystical assertions, which are all supposed to contain a part of the truth, is nothing but a bunch of contradictory claims and incompatible perspectives that can lead to absolutely no truth at all, but merely to inescapable subjectivism and relativism. There is, of course, one point of view that shows the whole picture. It's the God point of view. This is called subspecie aeternitatis. I probably butchered that last word. My bad. Latin for under the aspect of eternity, from the perspective of the eternal, and describes what is universally and eternally true, without any reference to or dependence upon the temporal portions of reality. It is the rational rather than the empirical perspective. It is the a priori, analytic, deductive point of view. This is what ontological mathematics is based on. We can work out this entire viewpoint because it is supplied by a single, holistic, complete, and consistent unitary principle, which can never be split against itself, namely, the principle of sufficient reason. We can work out this entire viewpoint because it has an entropy of zero, and therefore it expresses absolute unity, completeness, and wholeness. It is the viewpoint of a perfect mental singularity, aka God. It is the entropic Big Bang that produces separation, disunity, and multiple different perspectives that produces matter, space, and time, the sources of physical individuation. The reason for the Big Bang is that the eternal and necessary PSR, total actuality in Aristotelian terms, which concerns perfect being, has the capacity to split off a second. Hold on. Sorry about that. I had to sneeze. The reason for the Big Bang is that the eternal and necessary PSR, total actuality in Aristotelian terms, which concerns perfect being, has the capacity to split off a second mode of operation, namely the temporal and contingent PSR, which addresses all Aristotelian potentiality and efficient causation, which concerns dynamic becoming. In Hegelian terms, the thesis of being and the antithesis of nothing produce the synthesis of becoming. Wikipedia says, in the Logic, Hegel describes the dialectic of existence. First, existence must be posited as a pure being. A pure being, upon examination, is found to be indistinguishable from nothing. When it is realized, what is coming into being is at the same time also returning to nothing. In life, for example, one's living is also a dying. Both being and nothing are united as a becoming. End quote. The Big Bang involves asymmetry, entropic phase, changes, and the creation of space, time, and matter. And thus individuation and infinite plurality of competing perspectives. Yet we can eliminate all these different perspectives simply by rewinding them all to their common unitary origin. If we rewind the Big Bang universe of space, time, and matter to its origin, we arrive at the pre-Big Bang. Immaterial, pure mental state of zero entropy outside space, time, and individuation, at which everything is perfectly united, unless it is impossible to have conflicting different viewpoints. It's hilarious how the Wilburites say they believe in ultimate unity, and then they claim, that there is no viewpoint that shows the whole picture. Thus, they have explicitly denied the existence of ultimate unity, where by definition there is only a single viewpoint. We can easily work out what ultimate unity is by applying the principle of sufficient reason and its all-important corollary, Occam's razor. This means that reality, ultimate reality, must be as simple, stable, and general as rationally possible. This necessarily results in mathematics with a net result of zero and perfect symmetry being the answer to existence. The single, absolute, infallible ultimate viewpoint from which all other viewpoints are derived, but all of which are incomplete in relation to their origin. All multiple temporal, contingent, subjective, relative viewpoints flow mathematically from an eternal, necessary, objective, absolute, single viewpoint. The fallacious maneuver, as it is so often applied, is to deny the existence of the latter viewpoint because it is strictly rational and thus non-empirical for human beings. And this then means that all relative and subjective perspectives can be treated as being as good as each other. None can be privileged over another. This is the basis of the deranged religion of Discordianism based on chaos. Discordianism is at its core practically identical to Wilburism. Principia Discordia, the insane Discordian gospel, says, quote, The aneuristic principle is that of the apparent order. The eristic principle is that of apparent disorder. Both order and disorder are man-made concepts, and are artificial divisions of pure chaos, which is a level deeper than is the level of distinction-making. End quote. Isn't pure chaos just another man-made concept? How can pure chaos, formlessness, underpin any system of order? Who has ever seen chaos? Who has ever experienced chaos? How would anyone define chaos? The Discordian Gospel says, quote, "With a concept-making apparatus called the brain, we look at reality through the ideas about reality which our cultures give us. The ideas about reality are mistakenly labeled reality, and unenlightened people are forever perplexed by the fact that other people, especially other cultures, see reality differently." End quote. This is the classic map is not the territory fallacy. The people that most strongly hold this belief are the enlightened, according to their own self-proclamation. They are, of course, the truly endarkened. The Discordian Gospel says, "It is only the ideas about reality which differ. Real, capital T, true reality is a level deeper than is the level of concept." End quote. True reality is a pure idea, pure concept, pure mathematics. The map is the territory. The idea is all. The concept is all. The Discordian Gospel says, "We look at the world through windows in which have been drawn grids, concepts. Different philosophies use different grids. A culture is a group of people with rather similar grids. Through a window we view chaos and relate it to the points on our grid, and thereby understand it. The order is in the grid. That is the aneuristic principle." End quote. In fact, humanity looks at the world through the grid of consciousness predicated on man-made language. Humanity refuses to accept reality's own language, mathematics. That is the only valid grid. The grid of actual reality. The one and only true conceptual grid. The grid where concepts are ontological, not abstract. The Discordian Gospel says, "Western philosophy is traditionally concerned with contrasting one grid with another grid and amending grids in hopes of finding a perfect one that will account for all reality and will. Hence, say unenlightened Westerners be true. This is illusory. It is what we Eurasians call the aneuristic illusion. Some grids can be more useful than others, some more beautiful than others, some more pleasant than others, etc. But none can be more true than any other." End quote. This is the exact basis of subjectivism and relativism, of the toxic hatred of the objective and the absolute. The Discordian Gospel says, "Disorder is simply relegated information viewed through some particular grid, but like relation, no relation is a concept. Male, like female, is an idea about sex. To say that maleness is absence of femaleness, or vice versa, is a matter of definition and metaphysically arbitrary. The artificial concept of no relation is the eristic principle. The belief that order is true and disorder is false, or somehow wrong, is the aneuristic illusion. To say the same of disorder is the eristic illusion. The point is that little t truth is a matter of definition relative to the grid one is using at the moment, and that capital T truth, metaphysical reality, is irrelevant to grids entirely. Pick a grid, and through it some chaos appears ordered, and some appears disordered. Pick another grid, and the same chaos will appear differently ordered and disordered. Reality is the original Rorschach. Verily, so much for all that. End quote. The truly disturbing thing is that so many people find this kind of irrational drivel compelling. It's puerile, undergraduate thinking gone mad. In fact, the system automatically contradicts itself by making absolute claims about the nature of order, disorder, chaos, concepts, grids, ontology. Hold on, gotta cough again. Epistemology, and so on, which have you to believe in order to take the rest of the stick seriously, but when given the logic of the system, are themselves nothing but man-made claims, opinions and beliefs that should be rejected in exactly the same way that the Discordians enthusiastically encourage everyone to reject everything else. Illuminism is the opposite of Discordianism and Wilburism. And with all their discordant, contradictory, relativist and subjectivist viewpoints and absurd claims to some ultimate truth, even as they deny that such truth exists or can ever be accessed, Illuminism is the application of pure reason and logic, hence is absolute, objective, and infallible. It is based on total, rational simplicity. Only the irrational and illogical oppose ontological mathematics and Illuminism. The disastrous doctrine of relativism is even present in Einstein's famous special theory of relativity. Einstein rejected the absolute frame of reference, the ether, thus making all relative frames equally valid and destroying the logical basis of physics. The ether, the absolute criterion against which everything is relative, is in fact inescapable. It is literally written into the equations of Einstein's theory, completely unnoticed by him. The ether, the absolute, is light. Einstein was right to deny the existence of space-time ether. He was wrong to deny the existence of the ether. The ether, the absolute frame of reference, is that which exists outside of space-time and against which all space-time frames of reference are relative. The ether is exactly that which isn't matter and space-time. It's the mental singularity from which matter and space-time arise at the Big Bang. If you get rid of space-time, for example, all contingency, relativity, and entropy, what are you left with? You are left with the absolute singularity of light, dimensionless, immaterial, mental, non-entropic, pure mathematics. This fact is what pure analytic mathematics lies at the core of science, is what 100% of scientists refuse to accept. They are all ideological materialists and empiricists locked into an illogical and irrational ideological paradigm that excludes the PSR and Occam's razor and thus ontological mathematics. The Big Bang is where space, time, and matter erupt from material mind, which is not in space-time. Equally, it's where infinite different relative perspectives erupt from a single absolute perspective. Just as infinite relative space-time perspectives are generated from the single absolute perspective of light, infinite relative human perspectives are generated from the single absolute perspective of God, the zero-entropy monadic collective. The war that has to be won is against every trace of subjectivism and relativism, which has even infected science, thanks to Einsteinian relativity and the subjectivist Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. Einstein's ontology and epistemology are wrong because he rejected the absolute ether of light. and the Copenhagen interpretation's ontology and epistemology is wrong for exactly the same reason. Nothing ever happens probabilistically and indeterministically. These claims rely on the absence of an absolute truth where there is sufficient reason why every fact is thus and not otherwise. The Copenhagen interpretation is an outright attack on the PSR and Occam's razor. Bizarre quantum mechanical interpretations result in multiverse thinking, the supreme violation of Occam's razor, and the total repudiation of deterministic reason and logic. Don't delude yourself. Science is engaged in a war against mathematics. It uses mathematics to perversely subvert the ontology of mathematics. It consistently and systematically misinterprets mathematics via the fallacious man-made ideology of empiricism and materialism, which is opposed to reason and logic and predicated on the delusional human senses, the very senses that once asserted that the earth is flat and the sun revolves around the earth. Errors that are just as bad but are harder to detect are still embedded in science and much harder to remove. Okay, we're going to pause here because I want to see how the pages are coming up in the transfer to YouTube. So I want to make sure you guys can read along. If not, I'm monkey with the settings again. Remember, if you like what you hear, you like my voice characterizations of the idiots, the cool guys, the jerks, my normal narrator voice, if you like the fact that I feel like I've been crawling in a desert for 10 hours on my hands and knees and haven't had a drink of water, well, hit the subscribe button, because I'm bleeding blood and tears to make you happy.